Let's bring in Tom Friedman, the well-known book author and New York Times columnist. He's been looking at this from a very broad perspective, a high-level one. Tom, yesterday you said that you've been looking at this from 30,000 feet up. What's the view look like from there?
Well, Becky, it sort of fits in with what you guys have been talking about. We're kind of up against two exponentials, and one of the hardest things for the human mind to grasp is the power of an exponential. What happens when something just keeps doubling and doubling and doubling? So we've got a negative exponential in this COVID virus that just keeps doubling and doubling and doubling very quietly, and we still don't know the impact of it. But right now it's like a hurricane that's actually still offshore. The eye hasn't even made landfall yet. And so I was actually talking to Bill Joy, one of the co-founders of Sun Microsystems, the other day, and just asking him, what is a simple way to express the power of this exponential? He said, well, let's put it in terms that the average businessman could understand. The virus is like a loan shark who charges 25% interest a day. So think of it that we borrowed $1. That was the first day the coronavirus appeared, patient number one. Then we kind of fiddled around for 40 days. Now we owe that loan shark actually $7,500. If we wait 3 more weeks to repay our loan shark, we're going to owe them almost $1 million. That's the power of the exponential driving this virus. Now, at the same time, I would argue, there's an exponential that offers us hope, and you've just been talking about it this morning with Regeneron and other companies, and it's the power of Moore's Law. The power of Moore's Law, coined by Gordon Moore in 1965, argued that the speed and power of microchips would double roughly every 24 months. And Moore's Law is alive and well today, and it's what's given us the amazing compute power and technological power that we now have all these companies being able to offer possibly rapid both cures and vaccines. I don't know how rapid. We need to keep our feet firmly grounded here because remember, we still don't have a vaccine for HIV or malaria. These are diseases that have been around a long time that many people around the world have suffered from. But the power of compute today to rapidly, give us the kinds of cures or therapies we need. I'm a huge believer of it, and again, to express the power of that exponential on the upside. Several years ago, I was out actually to Intel, and I was asking them, what's an example of how Moore's Law works on the upside? And Intel had actually asked its engineers once to take a 1971 Volkswagen Beetle and try to guess if that Volkswagen Beetle had improved at the same rate microchips had since 1971, what would it look like today? And they calculated that if that were the case, that Beetle today, that Volkswagen Beetle would go 300,000 miles an hour. It would get 2 million miles per gallon, and it would cost you 4 cents to buy. You'd be able to drive it your entire life on a single tank of gas. So that's the other exponential we have here. And what I see, the story from 30,000 feet, we've got a race between these two exponentials, basically the exponential spread of a viral epidemic and the exponential power of compute. And the thing that will, I think, save us, though, the key metric, and all of your guests this morning have been talking about, I'm only looking at one number. It's not the Fed. It's not the 10-year. It's the number of patients, the ratio of patients per beds and ICU units. And can we keep and you had a wonderful graph on this morning. Can we keep the number of patients at the peak here below the number of beds in ICU units so that we don't get social disorder? That's what I'm most worried about, that you get a runaway there. So that's how I see it.
I love the compound interest and sort of exponential things, and that's something that does make sense to many people in our audience because of compound interesting and what they watch with the markets. Let's talk, though, about the response that we've been watching from authorities, because I have to say, last week, even this weekend, I was concerned that they weren't doing enough. It seemed to me that there was a decisive tone shift yesterday from the Trump administration, taking this much more serious, hardcore look at this, and from a lot of the state governments, too, that have been taking much more extreme steps to try and shut this down, including what Governor DeWine did in Ohio of overruling that judge and saying, forget it, we're not going to open the polls today.
Well, thank God for that. I still wish the president would even take a more urgent tone. I mean, we had some very irresponsible lawmakers, the governor of Oklahoma, Devin Nunes, over the weekend, tweeting about how they were in restaurants and everyone should come on out.
Yeah,
that was insane, basically. You cannot social distance fast enough right now when you're up against this kind of exponential to prevent it from running out of control. And the beauty of America, we have this federal system where mayors and governors can act. You've been having these people on, and I think they've acted very responsibly. I don't know if it's in the nick of time or near the nick of time, that I think it's giving us a chance at least for the good exponential and technology to win this race.
Hey, Tom, I wanted to ask you about the political morass of bailouts and the moment we're in, given that the airlines are now going hand in hand, and I have to imagine there's going to be lots of other industries and lots of conversation about this. We saw the aftermath of the bailouts in 2008, which may very well have worked, but politically clearly did not, and we're still living with it. How do you see it playing out this time?
Well, let's just talk about the underlying structure. And Neil Kashkari, was alluding to this morning. There are millions of owners and employers out there today who are long some asset they assume would go up in value. It could be a stock, a company, a home, a restaurant, a convenience store, and they're long that asset with borrowed money, money they can't now repay or not going to be able to very shortly. So we not only need the Fed to backstop their banks to prevent a total meltdown, we're going to need these banks to restructure these debts, and we're going to need to get fresh money into the pockets of their workers so they can eat after their last paycheck comes in the mail this week. So I'm totally in alignment with those who say, write every American a check, backstop everybody. We'll let Andrew Ross Sorkin write another fantastic book, as he did about the bailout, in 2008, and we can argue about that later. But you have to protect the system, because without the system, if the system starts to crack, there's not going to be any debate about anything.
But do you think that this time is going to be? Do you think this time is different insofar as a lot of people looked at that crisis as a man-made crisis? Do you think people treat this like a 9/11? Like a Katrina, like something more in a natural disaster category. And so the public, again, this goes to the larger sort of social issues. People talk about inequality in this country and the halving of what's taking place here. Do people, you think, accept that in a way that they might not have a little over a decade ago?
I do. And I think that, again, I really feel that. And I think that two things really impact me, Andrew. One is that my initial journalism experience in life was living inside a civil war in Lebanon, 1979 to 1984. For most of that time, I actually saw society break down. One of the most searing experiences I had as a journalist was watching a car basically going 50 miles an hour backward down a street to get away from fighting. People in America are so innocent and naive about how thin is the veneer of civilization once the system breaks. And they're also naive about what we're up against. We're up against Mother Nature here, okay? The downsides of Mother Nature, the spread of viruses. One of my real teachers and friend, Rob Watson, who invented green buildings, Rob likes to say, Mother Nature is just chemistry, biology, and physics. That's all she is. You can't talk her up. You can't talk her down. You can't say, Mother Nature, we're having a recession here. Could you kind of lay off the viruses for a while? She's going to do whatever chemistry, biology, and physics dictate. And Mother Nature always bats last, and she always bats 1,000. Do not mess with Mother Nature. And that's what we're up against. This is different than 2008. This is different from anything we have experienced. We're up against this relentless exponential force. And in the face of that, we have to take extraordinary measures to protect the system because that is what is potentially at stake.